thank you so much for joining us, Rocko.
Thank you for having me, Craig. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and so before we officially begin, I was curious if you could give our listeners a little bit of your kind of background and what led up to your new feature film, I Need You Dead.
Right. I am happy to do that, Craig. I have been making films since I was a little kid. Grew up in the YouTube era, as kind of when it was coming out for the first time, and it was really easy to get traction on YouTube in its earlier years. So I literally just had toys that I would run around and scream with, and somehow that amassed over 500,000 views and inspired the hell out of me as a kid to take up filmmaking. 20 years later or so, after kind of making shorts all through childhood and high school, I got around to actually working on a real set with Lloyd Kaufman and the Troma team on Shakespeare's Shitstorm, working as an electrician, gaffer grip type character. And I also really, just as a fly on the wall, got to really see how a feature film was made with real money. And went home, got my resources and team together, and produced, wrote, direct, edited I Need You Dead, which has been out for, actually today is the year anniversary of it premiering here in Portland, and also simultaneous year anniversary of when Oregon went into lockdown for quarantine, and I think many other states did too.
Yeah, yep, we did as well about this time, so it's been...
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, well, obviously, it's kind of the elephant in the room that we'll get to no matter what nowadays with talking about the pandemic itself. But no, that's, kind of really interesting here because there are a lot of influences in the film that you can see from Troma, with people just watching it, not necessarily even knowing kind of your background and that even Bloodhound Pix, we just did our kind of review during Fantasia of Shakespeare's Shitstorm and kind of so it was a lot of fun, and we talked about it as the ultimate, I guess, Troma film. It has all of the trauma to ever be traumaed, or whatever, however you want to phrase it.
Totally. I'm glad you guys liked it. It was a labor of love for sure. Everybody on that movie we all worked very hard on it.
Yeah, you can definitely tell. So I think kind of starting out, I'd love to hear more because a lot of the people that we have on, even myself included, though I started, I guess, in high school is when the YouTube generation, everything started really hitting. So I was a little bit before then, but I guess kind of around then too. But I was just curious about moving forward of how that really impacted it and sensibilities with creating film, and because it is a whole different landscape than it was when I was coming around, or 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever it may be.
Right.
Yeah, the whole industry has changed. I think that we're in this place where you'll see that pushback of people that don't want to do that, especially during this pandemic, that they don't want to, they want to stick with theaters, they want to stick with, a very specific way that worked, 3 decades ago, but might not now.
Yeah, it's kind of a scary thing, and I think, I don't know, it's interesting because when COVID happened, and we had our premiere at the Hollywood Theater in Portland, which we sold out. We sold out our 400 seats, and we probably could have done another night or two. And then it was like, okay, no, actually, our movie was the last movie to show in all of Oregon. And ever since, the theaters have been closed. So it was really a question of like, well, do we just put it online? And I'm actually kind of one of the people you're talking about who's kind of stubborn and is like, no, like I want it to get that theatrical release. I want it to get that legit experience that I want people to see it on the big screen. So what we actually did was the Bad Taste Video team, we raised a little money amongst ourselves, and we actually built our own drive-in
Oh, wow.
And we did drive-in screenings of it, and we sold out 3 showtimes of the film via drive-in style, kind of towards the butt end of the summer. And it was super fun. We got a lot of people to see the movie. And yeah, I mean, it was a success, and we kind of just moved on to DVDs from there. And now, a year later from our initial premiere date, now we're finally talking to distributors and streaming services about getting the film available online.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah. So what kind of was that, I guess, that process, especially during the pandemic, of like really has, moving to DVDs or moving to streaming kind of brought in new audiences that you weren't expecting, or has it kind of given a new life each time?
Yeah, it's funny because when we did the initial premiere, it was like, okay, all of our local friends, everyone who worked on the movie comes, all that jazz. Mm-hmm. Then when we did the drive-in, it was more of us like reaching out to Portlanders.
Okay.
And like to our city. And we had a lot of people from Portland who we didn't know who came, who just heard about it through our advertising or through like subreddits and stuff. And then, moving on to DVDs, we started to actually reach out beyond Oregon and Portland, started hitting more up the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And just like I still find myself shipping DVDs to people I don't know, to places I don't know in the United States. So the film has like its own voice out there through our trailers and advertising and people talking about it. So yeah, now it's kind of gotten out there, and then I guess hopefully with streaming, it would be able to transcend the U.S. and just be available to anyone, anywhere, and hopefully we'll get more of a global reach. That's my goal. We're not quite there yet, but that's my goal.
Okay. Yeah, and definitely, so you were talking about, obviously, Troma and, your connection with them, and the movie itself has a, I don't want to give too much away. Obviously, I'll let you decide what you want to spoil or not, or whatever it may be. But there is kind of that niche audience for those type of films. If you mention, especially with horror fans or most people that know the film world, you mentioned Troma, and there is a very specific brand to it.
Yeah.
So,
you could say that.
Yeah. I mean, many of our members and a lot of the people we talk about, they absolutely love it. But yeah, I know, like my wife, who has issues with gore, it's probably not as, easy on her watching Shakespeare Shitstorm or whatever it may be.
Right.
So has that did that play into, I guess, the making of the movie itself? Did you decide like how far you wanted to go into that Troma element, or what was kind of the process, I guess, of making one of these type of, these movies that have that kind of, I guess, sleaze to it, as it's in a good way?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the film, in many ways, is a tribute. It is, in some regards, is a tribute to those films of the 80s and 70s and 90s, and of just really over the top, shot on video, kind of goofy stuff. I'm a VHS collector, and so I have a lot of strange, DV movies that people have just made over the years that are clearly just people in their backyard shooting these things, but they have so much fun with the camera work and effects and performances, and they have more heart than a lot of the mainstream films that I see. So I love watching them, and so in many ways, I Need You Dead is a love letter to those things. But then, and it's like I'm also one of those kids, and I'm one of the suckers who watched The Evil Dead in high school or whatever, and then decided to make every shot a Dutch and have every camera flying across the screen because it just looks fucking cool. And I have fun doing it, and then you kind of branch off from there. But this movie is also, I think, a big middle finger to all of that too, and trying to say, yes, this was all fine and dandy, but it's time for something new. It's time to shake things up a little bit. And so I kind of tee it up with, especially with all of our marketing, to be a bit more like, ooh, this is going to be ooey gooey, gory fun. You know exactly what you're getting in for if you're our target audience. And then even trying to surprise those people was kind of my challenge.
Yeah. And it definitely is. I think, and part of what we haven't officially talked about yet for the podcast, but when we do, part of kind of what I really appreciated was the element for me going into so many horror films now. I think there is that, where so many are going to, like, making a throwback 80s film where they put on a Carpenter score and they do all these elements, and it's just, it's gotten to me to a point of exhaustion of, like, I just want to see, like, filmmakers try and tackle something and make something push forward. Where I think this film, I agree with that, it really kind of honors both of giving that throwback, which not a lot of people, none that I've seen ever, they want to acknowledge, again, Carpenter 80s or whatever it may be, but they don't want to acknowledge the Troma 80s or any of the other, quintessential kind of horror 80s films. But, so I love that, and then I love that element of kind of changing it, and there is, again, without spoiling anything, there is kind of a commentary on it that is said within the dialogue, and that for me personally, I really appreciate it as somebody who's have grown to that point of exhaustion of seeing, like, oh, here's another 80s throwback or whatever it may be.
Totally, I'm in the same place. It's like, the 80s were great. Let's do something even better. That's my attitude towards it, and I feel like most are like, no, let's just do it again. And it's like, we can't. It's 2020.
Yeah.
That was 40 years ago, man. Get with it.
Well, now we have, Marvel movies or whatever it may be. The big movies are the ones doing those throwbacks now too, and it's just everywhere. It's a little much. So we're out. Bad Taste Video's out here trying to change things, and we'll keep pushing. Yeah. No, so I mean, it's glad. I'm glad kind of hearing, newer generations and all that really pushing forward and trying to carve kind of their own path instead of just going back to when, I guess that mentality of making it great again, even though it necessarily wasn't even that great during the time it came out, but that sense of nostalgia. But I also love kind of hearing you talk about, choosing these movies, or really loving these movies that it seemed like people were so passionate about and cared so much for, and you can really see this in I Need You Dead, and a lot of my big reviews and things we've talked about on this podcast of, a bad movie or a good movie, and I've always said, and so have my co-hosts, that, it's all subjective, but for me, what I would consider a bad movie is one that feels like people just did it to cash the check, or they just did it to jump on some bandwagon. Where this does feel very much like a, passion. It feels like in some way or another, be it punk rock or whatever, there's an art to it in that sense, instead of, just a bunch of people wanting to make a buck.
Yeah, trust me, we are far from that. We are far from making any money on this movie. I can guarantee you that. We've probably made maybe like 5% of our budget back. Oh. I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah. So I know you did the premiere, and did you go out to festivals, or what has that been like too? I know with the pandemic, a lot of them have either gone online or they've kind of closed down. Has that been a struggling process?
Yeah, the film festival thing, I learned a really hard lesson with the festival thing, and any filmmaker who's listening to this who hasn't really played the festival game yet should heed to this warning. But I was really in a rush to try to get my stuff into festivals, and so when a festival is like right around the corner, the submission fee is a lot higher. Yep. but I wanted to start seeing results right away. I wanted to see the film get into stuff and see it playing because, COVID was upsetting.
Yeah.
We don't want to wait for things. We just want, we were, make something happen now. Nothing's happening. So I submitted to a lot of festivals that were right around the corner. Little did I know, submitting to festivals that are like a month away is a terrible, terrible thing to do because the festivals have already solidified their lineups 90% of the time and have no interest in actually reviewing new movies, which is why it's so expensive to submit. Because they're already ready to go, so they don't want more people submitting, so they raise the price. And my sorry ass paid all of it. And I burned a lot of money doing that. I won't do it again. You gotta submit to the festivals that are the farthest away, spend the least amount of money, and be the first impression on their lineup to actually get in. So that's what I learned.
No, that's a great kind of bit of advice. We've talked about festivals before, but only from the screenwriting perspective. So it's great to kind of hear it from the filmmaking perspective.
Totally.
So, kind of now as we've built up, we've really talked, I guess, about the tones and all of that. Would you be willing to, I guess, give a little bit of what I Need You Dead is about, as much as you'd like, obviously?
Yeah. Well, I'll say this is the only discussion I've done on the film where the interviewer hasn't spoiled the entire movie within the first 5 minutes. So I really appreciate you. I think it's kind of obvious, at what point in the movie it's this movie is different than I thought. This is the moment in the film where I would stop telling my friend what it's about. Yeah. To me, it seems very obvious, but I guess it's not. Maybe because things change earlier than people would expect, but I don't know. That's fine. I'm gonna keep this spoiler free. It'll be the one spoiler free content available on the internet. I'll share the hell out of it. So, the film's primary concept of this dude and creature dynamic that you see in the trailers really stemmed from a time where I was really dealing with a very deep depression that had completely dominated my life and was halting me from progressing as a person in a lot of major ways, and not probably being the best person to the people around me. And I had been making tribute movies most of my young teen life, and I had just came off of making a short film called Meat Lovers, which was 100% just like a Troma tribute film. Because I had just gotten into Troma for the first time. I was seeing all of Lloyd's behind the scenes stuff, and I was absolutely floored by all of it. So I made that, and then going into this, I was I started looking at my work and being that short film was just a John Carpenter ripoff. That short film was just a Troma ripoff. That short film was just noir ripoff, whatever. And it was piling on to the depression I was feeling. And I was like, what do I need to do? And it kind of hit me that it was I need to do something about that's a tribute, in a weird way. I need to rip off myself. I need to rip off my life. And that will be an expression of me. And through the process of doing that, I started to realize that it was becoming therapy for my depression. It was a way for me to get all of those nasty things I was thinking and feeling out, and not at other people, but onto a script and into a film. And once we actually wrapped shooting the film, it was I had come out of the other side of the tunnel, and all of my evil feelings and terrible, sadnesses were suddenly locked up in this movie. And it was a very cathartic experience. And that's my story in relation to the film.
Okay. Yeah, no, that is very powerful, and I think it's something that is not talked about a lot or as much, especially during this pandemic. Be it that depression rates, everything has gone through the roof, rightfully so,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much stuff, and I think, there's kind of this mentality that either keeping, a positive face, or, that you can put it in your art, but it has to be, you can't put all of it in, because it has to still be accessible in some way. There's all these different things that make it seem like you can't show that true vulnerability, which, I think this movie, it really does.
Yeah, I wanted to put it all out there because I knew it would make it. That's the thing, is at the end of the day, I'm a horror guy through and through. I love horror films. I love, horror is so important, and a friend of mine kind of had this thought the other day that resonated with me, but just that people who do horror films, they're in touch with their dark side, and it allows them to not have to hide away all those horrible things that all humans think about all the time. It gives them, they're a very unique batch of people because they have this way to get it out, where some guy in an office can't do that, some person doing a voice on a kid's puppet show can't do that in the same way that a artist that works with themes of horror can. And I feel like it makes life a little bit easier to live when you have that outlet. So I'm always going to be a horror guy at heart, and with that in mind, it's if I'm going to make a horror film, then to make it scary, you got to put 101% out there of how, it's you got to actually almost exaggerate and blow up some of the horrors that you're feeling, to make it, I don't know, just to to make it fantastic enough to deserve to be on a silver screen. It's if it was just a movie about some guy being depressed, okay, whatever. But if you make the depression into a slimy, wisecracking hairball from New York or whatever, now it's a movie,
Yeah. No, definitely. I agree with you 100% on that.
Totally.
But I guess kind of moving forward, in kind of talking about your horror influences and things like that, especially so doing it out in Portland. But I know Lloyd Kaufman, their whole thing is, so much of it has been in Jersey, and were you able to kind of utilize some of those connections, utilize that, I guess, what you did working with him prior, especially even though you were on opposite sides of the country, or was it just kind of something where you from the ground up, where you were out in Portland area, making it by yourself?
I was able to utilize some connections from Shakespeare Shitstorm, actually quite a few, because Lloyd did a promotional video with us where he helped, he cameoed in our promo video as we were trying to raise funds for the film. So him immediately attaching his face to it right at the get-go helped with publicity, I think, and just making people oh, this is a legit project going down, because, people who love Lloyd love Lloyd.
Yeah.
So that helped. And then Eric Fox, who was also a contestant on sci-fi shows like Face Off special effects TV show.
Okay. Yeah.
He did special effects on Shakespeare Shitstorm. And we would get to smoking a little weed every now and then on set of that film and kind of buddied up a little bit. And once I was doing I Need You Dead, I actually hit him up. I was like, hey, would you be down to design this creature for I Need You Dead? And he was super down. He gave me a really good deal. And yeah, he just sent over 3 puppets for us to use. So we had that. A couple of the people I met on the crew of Shakespeare Shitstorm, my buddy Kevin, who I met on that film. Coincidentally, while we were both in New York, I discovered that he lived in Olympia, Washington, only an hour and a half away or so from Portland. So then he came down and he was our gaffer. So yeah, I mean, there were lots of little connections from that film and kind of transferring over to I Need You Dead to help us make it happen. It was super cool.
And that's, yeah, I mean, a great thing to have and be able to kind of establish that. And I think that's kind of one of those back and forth that, as part of you were talking about in your initial email of kind of understanding that so much of this segment that we do is trying to present an authentic light into what it's like making a film kind of in this modern era, because it's sometimes you get information from somebody that made their career back in 1979, and it's drastically changed since then.
Right.
And so it's really nice to hear kind of this process, and especially being able to make these connections and utilize them, and even with a pandemic and even with whatever it may be, we're kind of at a place where you can use people all throughout the country now. It's not as, I guess, big of a pool as it used to be, or at least we can connect a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And it's made advertising the film a lot easier too. Just having something like YouTube during the pandemic to be able to upload a new trailer to. It's like, okay, how else would we have advertised it if it was 1979 and the pandemic was happening?
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I'd just be running around throwing DVDs at people's doors like a paper boy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
I guess you were talking about getting funding and things like that. What was the whole process of that? Did you use a crowdfunding source? Did you go through investors?
Yeah, it's funny. I always read people being like I read like Bruce Campbell's book about how they were funding Evil Dead, and I've read other people's things too, where they're just like, yeah, you just gotta find like these investors, these people who have money, who just like want to give you money. And I'm like, okay, sure, and then they're all like, oh yeah, like they're gonna think that you're the next Steven Spielberg, so they're gonna be so excited about it, and you just need to have like a good pitch or whatever. And we tried that route for a little bit, and like of course you get some donations from family.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know where these like rich dentists are that I keep hearing about when I read all these how-to books. I don't know where the hell they come from. So basically, especially for a horror film, I don't know where they are. So actually, what I ended up doing, I had a band before I made I Need You Dead. We had been touring a lot. We were on a label, and I ended up having to end that project to do I Need You Dead. However, with those connections, I actually threw a lot of fundraiser shows and concerts where we had a lot of bands play.
Okay.
And we just like I hit up these bands who I had worked with for a handful of years by that point, and I was like, hey, I'm doing that movie that I was always talking about. Would you be down to come play this show in support of the film? We're trying to raise money. And everybody was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And we raised a good amount of money through the tickets of that, just playing in people's basements, doing like house parties, house show style things. But most of all, the way that I earned the money is once I got back from working on Shakespeare's Shitstorm, I moved out of my place in Portland. I moved back in with my dad and little brother, and I got a job as a fry cook, basically, for just working the deep fryers for about a year and just saving every fucking penny. That was like the consistent money that was coming in during that time. And then, we had a crowdsourcing, campaign. I think we gained, maybe we got like $5,000 or $6,000 out of that. So that was cool. Just from all these different sources, we got like a $5,000 here, $5,000 there. And, we probably raised about 15 or 20 grand. And then we had about 10 grand worth of like equipment and things that we bought along the way.
Okay.
So it's probably about 30,000 in total.
Okay. Oh, that's great. And you're able to accomplish a lot on that budget. And I think, it's great to hear that we can finally put the rich dentist's myth to rest. Something that
I don't know.
About. Yeah.
I don't know what dentist Raimi had, but he was fucking friendly. I don't know.
Yeah. Because I think Lloyd even talks about it in his, Make Your Own Damn Movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it must have been a thing in the 70s and 80s to go to dentists for money. I really don't. Like, when I go to the dentist, they just fucking destroy me. They're just laughing their asses off as blood is just cascading out of my gums to my fucking toes. I don't know in what world they would be, like, writing me a check.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you've been talking about kind of, the whole process, everything, and it's been really great. I'm interested because you were talking about, being in a band beforehand, and the movie itself, has a very interesting, there are songs in it. Again, this one's going to be a spoiler-free interview. There are songs in it, but there is a very interesting, I guess, sound design throughout it.
Sure.
That, plays just as much of a part, especially as it goes on and certain elements are dropped. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this without...
No, yeah, you're doing great.
Certain elements are dropped that may impact the sound in certain ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very crucial part. And what was kind of that process of the sound design, and how much did you put into that, and then how much did you find others through your connections or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, well, in terms of music, we had a lot of really, really amazing people come together to work on the soundtrack, and we have stuff in the movie that is, kind of like new wavy punk rock Devo shit, to John Carpenter synthy shit, to like total harsh noise, like screamo crazy shit. I mean, we have everything musically, and I'm super proud of our score. And just like you had mentioned, like, because of my connections with just like the local music scene here, I was just able to bring together the most talented people that I knew. And everybody was just super stoked, because it was just something different to work on a film soundtrack. I think it's something that everybody wanted to do, but there just wasn't a movie to do it for. And so everybody was very ecstatic to work on it, and it was super fun. And we're actually working on a physical release of the soundtrack right now. So that's around the corner. And then, in terms of sound design for the film, I mean, how do you even talk about it? That's the thing is, with I Need You Dead, to put it simply, we wanted to add a new element of horror to the game, where we were going to alter certain elements of production in the film that would break your mold of what you believe a movie is how it's supposed to act, and how it's supposed to bring you into a place of comfortability, because there's all these things you're like, well, in a film, sound is supposed to sound like this all the time, because that's the point of a movie. Yeah. And so to kind of like break those rules, to me, sounded interesting and scary in certain ways, to really take the audience out of their comfort zone. And so that was kind of our creative approach. I mean, it's funny, because in terms of accomplishing that, it's just like, in a lot of ways, you just don't doll it up as much, or you intentionally tamper with things in ways that most sound engineers would be like, don't do that, that's going to ruin, it's going to ruin the whole thing. It's like, whatever scares I want the sound engineers in the auditorium to be trembling. Yeah. That's my goal. So it's just like, oh, what's going on here? This is wrong. So yeah, that was our approach. We just wanted to have a kind of a punk attitude about it.
Okay. Yeah, and it makes a lot of
smash the guitar on stage kind of attitude.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I know it's interesting that you brought up harsh noise, because it's such a genre that people don't talk about, and I always think it's so like ingrained in, it feels like it's so ingrained in the horror community. My brother himself is he wouldn't call it harsh noise, I don't know, but he performed all over with Wolf Eyes, or even Thurston Moore, or playing.
With Wolf Eyes?
Yeah, yep, he's good friends with them. He's out of Detroit area, so
we were talking to Wolf Eyes when we were making this movie about them doing some music for it, and we were working something out, but then it just got too expensive for our budget.
Yeah, they did. I remember, geez, many years ago now. I was probably about 14 or 15. I went to a show with my brother in Detroit, and because he was playing with them at the time, like, you know.
Yeah.
And so I met them, and that was like right before. I think they ended up being on one of their songs was on The Office at one point, or it was, you know, before all of that stuff. But I was like, wow, here's this band that is this harsh noise, like, and they're actually, like, you know, for what they are doing, they're making quite a name for themselves. So it's really interesting, you know, years down the road seeing that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was. I wish we could have worked with them. I love their music.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's great to hear, and yeah, just really interesting because it's something that I'm really passionate about and love talking about. But obviously, you're probably the only person that I think I've met, well, that I've been talking to that has brought it up.
Totally. Yeah. No. That's the thing, man. Is it's just like literally with any art, if there's passion behind it, my ears are open. I wanna understand it. To me, it's very frustrating to me when I hear or see something that has clearly had a lot of passion poured into it, and I'm not able to connect with it.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, oh man, I'm missing out on a part of the artistic perspective and experience here. And so I just cross my fingers that one day it will click with me. But it's so funny, like, just like even with, I don't know, I get so excited when I start liking something that other people in my circles will clearly never understand. Like, for instance, like a while back, I heard like a Hannah Montana song on the radio or something. Okay. And I was like, oh, I kind of get this. Like, this is actually kind of sick. And then I was just like, I'm just going to get really into Hannah Montana this month and just push it on all my friends and just make them question who the fuck I am. And it was great. Like, it's a ride, man. I love it.
Yeah, no, it is.
So Hannah Montana, Harsh Noise, Wolf Eyes, whatever. Yeah. Let's do it.
Put it all together.
Yeah. Remix.
Yeah. So, as we're kind of wrapping up this, and it's been great to hear kind of the process from the ground up, and, you know, again, you know, as there's been kind of this recurring theme about, you know, the passion of a project, and, you know, its seeds, you know, anything else. But kind of going off that and kind of going to our wrap up, is there anything in the future that you're working on currently? And then how can people find you? How can they follow you? All of that good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another feature kind of in the works. Currently, working title is Flapjacks, kind of revolving around an opioid-style pancake crisis.
Okay.
Whatever that means. And we got some new stuff coming out on the Bad Taste Video YouTube channel the next coming months. So some cool musical stuff is going up on the date of this recording, which I'm pretty stoked about, and some other stuff coming up in the following weeks to come. And I Need You Dead coming up on streaming hopefully very soon. I am trying to knock down Shudder's door to try to get it on there because I love what they're doing.
Yeah.
But we will see. We will see. And yeah, in terms of social and stuff, you know, Bad Taste Videos on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, we got a website, you know, we're on Twitch, we got it all. Okay. So just look for the little yellow logo with the blue-faced man, and you're on the right track.
And we definitely will, and yeah, we'll promote all of that. And especially can't wait to see what will be happening, and hopefully you get into Shudder. But of course, our last, I guess, big question is talking about, since most of our podcast revolves around, you know, obviously independent and obscure horror films, is there any that you really champion or love that you believe deserves more eyes that you would like to kind of promote?
Yeah, I definitely do. I'm curious if this person has already been mentioned on your show before, because he is so beloved in the underground by his very niche fan base, but James Bell, that name you know of?
I do, but we actually have not. I don't think we've talked about it yet.
Yeah, James Bell, his film Tantrum, which is, I think it runs about 40-something minutes. So, but to me, it's a full film experience. That movie, Tantrum, had a humongous impact on I Need You Dead, and a lot of the inspiration that I had for where that film goes beyond the surface level. And man, I just love, like, in terms of shot on video stuff, like, he is just the king. His effects are just incredible. The music that he puts in his films is incredible. The way that he cuts things together, the way he alters images in post-production, his like very weird demeanor on screen as most of the main protagonists of his films. I mean, it's just like, it's so easy to fall down the rabbit hole. And plus, I mean, they're disturbing movies. Like, if you're a horror fan and you're looking for something new to kind of weird you out, like, James is your guy. So I really can't. As I'm speaking, I'm sitting here looking at my entire collection of his films. I own every single one of them. You got to check him out. I can't vouch for him enough.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, and we'll see if we can have somebody choose a specific one so we can actually highlight it on the show itself instead of,
Tantrum is like the one for me. That's like, Tantrum is my favorite of his films. That had a huge influence on I Need You Dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And again, it's been so great having you join us, Rocko. And yeah, of course, we'd love to have you back. And anytime you have an update, we'd definitely love to kind of hear more and be able to push it, because I Need You Dead is something that, again, this is our spoiler-free interview, is something with a lot of passion behind it, and goes in many unexpected places, is all I will say.
Totally. Nice. Yeah, thank you very much, Craig. I appreciate your time today. I had a good time talking with you.
Bloodhound Pix podcast is part of the Morbidly Beautiful podcast network. Produced by Josh Lee, Craig Draheim, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Editing by Kyle Hintz.